Something that really terrifies me, you've probably seen it yourself in some situations. I call it the devolution of the family environment. It's something that when I even feel it and when I'm part of it, it really creeps me out, honestly. Maybe my wife and I have a hard conversation. We might bicker a little about something, or we have a tough conversation, maybe a somewhat heated discussion of a topic. That spirit then, you can see it just sort of starts to infect us and infect the conversations that take place. Then suddenly some kid gets a little upset about something that happens, and then there's squabbling, and then mom and dad, I find myself yelling at the squabbling. Now everybody's gotten a little more upset. And then later that day, we have a little more argument. There's some yelling as nobody shows up for dinner. Go to bed, wake up in the next morning. Everybody's more frustrated and angry. And for the period of 2 or 3 days, we find ourselves in this disgusting, slowly degrading sickness. And if you didn't know what our family life could look like, and does look like often when it's very good, if you didn't know what it felt like as we encourage each other and love each other, and we have words of happiness and polite rebuke and all of these other kinds of good, godly things amongst our family life, if you didn't know any of that, and we've had people around and they might not even notice it, but we feel it. We feel this devolution of the family environment that seeps into the words and actions that we share with each other. Then, thank God, we will, maybe I or one of the other people of the family, but I'll come home and I'll say, hey guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that argument, or I'm sorry about the yelling, or I'm sorry that I was so upset about something. And it serves as a reset, and you can just feel the whole environment change. And then we'll get to go through a couple days again, maybe even a week or something longer, of more encouraging and forgiving and godly rebuking and correcting and instructing and hopeful time. It's a spiritual battle that plays out right in front of us. You might have felt it in your own lives or in maybe your workplace. It can easily become a poison. And C.S. Lewis, he does this really great job of describing that battle in his writings, the Screwtape Letters. He does a nice job of articulating how this poison pill of spiritual devolution enters into so many relationships to corrupt an environment. And he articulates, for example, at one spot how the spirits, the evil spirits, should really try to take our attention away so that these interactions are destructive to our relationships. C.S. Lewis says this. He says, one of the things you can notice, you can weaken the prayers. He's talking to the evil spirit, right? The evil spirit can weaken the prayers by diverting our attention from God himself back to our own state of our mind about God. So instead of thinking about just God, we think about how we're thinking about God. In fact, in all of our activities, you get us thinking that are favorable to God. We actually just bend our minds. He says, just bend the human mind back to itself. Let an insult or a woman's body so fix the man's attention outward that he does not notice, I'm now getting into the state called anger or the state called lust. And sometimes instead, on the contrary, you can get him to think, my feelings are now growing more devout or more charitable. And so you fix his attention inward, that he no longer looks beyond himself to see God or his own neighbors. You see what he's saying, Lewis is pointing out, the devil has a really good trick. The evil spirits, they have this really great trick that they get us to flip back and forth from either paying attention to how we are thinking about the world or what's going on in our own hearts, and in all of it to get our attention off of either thinking about just God or the person right next to us. It gets us stuck in our own heads and in our own hearts, and it's so destructive. Paul helps us this morning dig out of these pits and make progress in our spiritual warfare, our spiritual battle. And so he wants to take us into 1 Timothy chapter 4. I'd like to direct your attention to 1 Timothy chapter 4 as we continue our study of vocation this morning. And today Paul wants to make this point for us that your vocation is the setting for spiritual warfare. Let me show you this from 1 Timothy chapter 4. First, Paul begins by saying, the Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. So what is Paul saying? I'm going to teach you here. I'm going to teach you what spiritual warfare looks like. Right? Now, he says, I'm going to teach you about deceiving spirits and the things that are taught by demons. Now, if you had to guess what would be demonic, what might you say? Where do you think Paul is going to go? Some of you might say, Harry Potter. You remember the big thing back in, I don't know, it was about 7, 8, 10 years ago. Harry Potter was the great evil spirit of the time. It was very demonic. I'm not sure if that was a concern for some of you, but that was for a time. Or then there was, earlier than that, there was Ouija boards. Ouija boards were going to be demonic. Or even, I think before that, there was a time where punk rock or rock and roll, right, was demonic. That was where the evil spirits worked. And so you might expect that that's the kinds of things that Paul is going to say. He might say, watch out for these crazy, deceptive, spiritual people. Or don't go to Africa where there's spiritual dances or something like that. Instead, what does Paul say? He says, here's what these false teachings teach. They forbid people to marry and order them to abstain from certain foods. I don't know about you, but every time I read this, it's a letdown. I'm like, Paul, that's really the best you can do? Paul, I don't know if you've ever watched any genuine spiritual battles, but I don't think anybody's fighting a spiritual battle when they tell me not to eat too much sugars because they'll hurt my body. I don't think anybody's telling me not to get married to somebody because it's just a waste of money. I mean, are they really demonic? Is that really an evil spiritual teaching? Isn't that kind of a letdown? Don't you expect something far grander from the Apostle Paul? He might say, people will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. And so when you see somebody that's foaming by the mouth and they're raving and they're throwing themselves around on the floor, stay away from them. That's what you expect Paul to say, don't you? Not watch out for people who tell you not to get married. But what does Paul say? The evil spirits are going to tell us, don't get married and don't eat certain food. Now, we need to clarify this a little bit, okay? Paul did not live in the era of highly processed foods. If your doctor tells you don't eat too many sugars because it's going to destroy you, I think that's probably okay. Paul is not talking about that, right? If your doctor says lay off the fats because your cholesterol is a little high, I think that's also probably okay. Paul is talking about a couple of very particular things. For example, he's drawing on the Essenes from the area of Qumran. You might have heard that there was a sect of Jewish people from Qumran. You know Qumran? Everybody at least vaguely familiar with Qumran? There was a location out to the east of Jerusalem that's called Qumran, and there was a group of Jewish people that lived there. Now, Qumran has become one of the most important historical sites in the last 100 years because of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Most of them were stored in the area around Qumran. However, the people of Qumran were rather strict in their religious practices. And they said this: you ought to reject pleasures as an evil. You should regard abstaining to be a virtue. And you should neglect marriage. Okay, that was what's reported how they taught living a religious life. You would live a good religious life if you abstained, you rejected pleasures, you denied yourself, and you rejected marriage. So that's what Paul is arguing about here, right? Or there was a Greek philosopher, Anaretitus, who said he preached against marriage, and he also commanded abstinence from animal foods. And that would be good spiritual or religious practice. Even an early Christian father, a very famous Christian named Tertullian, said that virginity is a higher way of living. It's a more godly life. Now, these were the concerns that Paul then is addressing as he's saying, certain people are going to come along and they are going to command people to reject foods and reject marriage. Paul's point is to say what? Go back to how God created the world. God created this world, and he said, I'm giving you all of the land and the animals for your good. They are for you. You are to care for them, rule over them, but then also enjoy them so that you can steward this world for my good. God also said, I'm giving you a man or a woman. If you're a woman, I'm giving you a man. If you're a man, I'm giving you a woman so that you can join together, be fruitful and multiply and fill this earth and rule together over it. Be my stewards in this domain. Right? That was God's picture of this world from the very beginning. He pictured that you and I would not be these slaves that are constantly getting rejected and beaten and having to ignore our desires in life. But neither are we going to be lords who get to make up the world the way we want it to be. Right? Rather, we are stewards that are representing God and carrying out his good will into this world. That was Paul's vision for this, God's vision for this world from the very beginning. And those people then who would get you to reject certain foods for the sake of a religious practice, or who would get you to reject marriage just so you could be a more godly and spiritual person. Now that's a great evil. All right, let's take a step back then. Where did Paul expect people to engage in spiritual warfare then? Or in spiritual struggle? Were people joining in spiritual struggle as they came together for special prayer meetings at church and laying hands on one another? Were people engaging in spiritual battle as they went over to far-off places, Africa or someplace else, and they looked for people who had become demon-possessed or were sick from an evil spirit, and they were supposed to lay hands and rebuke the evil spirits? Right? Were people supposed to engage in spiritual struggle even by going and hiding away in inner rooms and searching their hearts? Were people supposed to engage in spiritual struggle like the early desert monks? There were some groups of people that said, the way to avoid spiritual battle in life is to go hide out in the desert, because then you won't have to deal with other people, and it's other people who always get you to sin. Is that how all of these ways? No, where did Paul say, go to avoid spiritual struggle? Right where God put you. Wherever you are put in life is where you should engage in spiritual struggle. God made you a human to steward and rule over his world. And whether you are an engineer or a farmer, or a baker, or you serve people at Walmart, or you work as a nurse in the hospital, wherever you are, you ought to engage in a spiritual struggle right there, to take the good things that God has given you, to enjoy them, and then to pass them on to others. And you ought to commit yourself to this rule and this reign of God's world in marriage and in all of the other places in life. And so God teaches here through the Apostle Paul, right, that this place where you and I commit ourselves or practice a spiritual struggle is right where God put us. It is, as he says, vocation is this setting for spiritual warfare. And you and I should say, I fight my spiritual war when I live my vocation. Now, some of you might quickly say, and I need to mention this, or we need to highlight this, right, that do we really have to deal with spiritual battles today? Here's 4 things that basically all Christian teachers agree on with regards to spiritual warfare. First, that we are really and truly involved in a spiritual war or spiritual struggle. It's undeniable from the scriptures, right? The Apostle Paul says, we are not struggling against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and the powers and the authorities of this evil age. Also, Jesus Christ is the triumphant deliverer and king. He rules and reigns over all things. And whenever we talk about our spiritual battles and struggles, we need to keep that in mind. Christ rules and reigns. He has ascended to his throne. Third, though, this modern age that we live in deadens us to the reality of spiritual warfare. I would guess that if I took a poll of all of you this morning about the last time you thought of spiritual struggles in your lives, and you really paid attention to the work of an evil spirit, the spiritual world in your lives, you'd all say, what? It's been a couple months at least. No, every day, right? That's why the Lord teaches us in his prayer to say, deliver us from the evil one. Lastly, we do need to be careful on the other side that errors and excesses occur in what's often called deliverance ministries. That is, there's certain ministries that have committed themselves to this casting out of evil spirits. And it's easy to make too big of a deal out of spiritual warfare. Spiritual warfare is a real thing, and we need to engage in it without making too big of a deal in it. And I would tell you and I that we do so by saying, as Paul said, I fight my battles, my spiritual battles, when I live my vocation. This is going to be an amazing thing for us. Did you hear what Paul said at the end of this lesson this morning? He said this. He said, when you do this, you will save both yourselves and your hearers. You will save both yourselves and your hearers. Now, I want you to think about what Paul said when he said that for a second. The devil himself rejected God, rebelled against God. He got permission from God to attack Job. He managed to kill Job's sons and daughters, destroy all of Job's life. The devil himself tempted David so that he got David to count all of the people of the nation of Israel. And because of that, then thousands of Israelites died. The devil himself got Saul to hate David, and so Saul tried to kill the future king of Israel. The devil himself tempted Judas, seized Judas, so that he would put to death the very Son of God, betray Jesus himself to death. There is no doubt when you read the scriptures and you look through all of the things that the devil did, that the devil has incredible power. Who are you to stop the evil spirits of this world? If the devil wants to have your family, are you going to be able to stop him? If the devil wants to destroy your work, what are you going to do about it? If the devil wants to come after your nation, do you think you can do something? Who are you? Now that's a really sobering thought. And I'm not saying that to you because I'm trying to bully you and berate you. I'm saying that to you so you realize, and I realize, what Paul says here. He says, if you do this, you will save yourself and your hearers. The God of heaven and earth has promised that when you live your vocation, when you live where God has called you, when you preach and listen to the Word and you pay attention to the Word of God, and then you live carefully according to it, wherever God has put you in your life, you will save yourself and the people around you. Now that is a phenomenal promise. Imagine that God has said to you, I have buried $1 million in your backyard. It's there, it's yours. Just don't listen to all of the people who say digging for the treasure in your backyard is a stupid waste of your time and you'll ruin your life. And at the same time, commit yourself to convincing and showing everybody else that that treasure is actually there. You can save the people around you, and you can save your very own life by simply digging for the treasure and then showing others that it's there. Jesus has conquered the devil. He put that spear and that sword through his heart once and for all, and there is nothing that that prince of darkness can do against him. With him attached to him, holding on to him, you will save yourself and everybody around you. So friends, fight that spiritual battle, fight that spiritual struggle. Wherever God has placed you, live out your place in your station and your function in life so that you can save yourself and the people with you.